The smack echoed like a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the cabin. The elderly woman froze, hand to her cheek, disbelief trembling in her eyes. The flight attendant's face drained of color. I didn't mean, she startled me, a calm voice interrupted. That's one version of assault. Would you like to try another? All eyes turned to the aisle. Leah Daniels stood slowly, her blazer crisp, her tone precise. My grandmother has arthritis in both wrists. She couldn't have startled you if she tried. The attendant bristled. Sit down before I call security. Leah smiled faintly. Oh, please do. I'd love to brief them on the definition of simple battery under 18 US Code Paragraph 113. A murmur spread among passengers. Phones rose. Cameras blinked red. Leah crouched beside her grandmother, voice soft. You okay, Nana? Then, louder to the attendant. This flight just became a legal classroom. Let's see who learns the hardest lesson. Welcome to Respect Wins Stories, a place where powerful tales come alive, and every word carries meaning. I would love to know where you are joining from today. Share it in the comments below. And while you do, sit back, relax, and let your heart open to a story that will move your soul and spark your imagination. Every story here carries a message. Because in the end, respect always wins. Let us begin. Leah Daniels, 19, second-year law student, had planned nothing heroic that morning. Just a quiet flight home with her grandmother, Ruth Daniels, 75 and unstoppable in faith and heels. They had splurged on first class, Ruth's first time ever, a gift Leah swore her scholarship stipend could spare. But arrogance didn't check seat numbers. It walked in uniform, smiled for protocol, and struck when it thought no one important was watching. Leah had studied the law's language her whole life. Now she'd speak it mid-air, because at 30,000 feet, one slap had just turned into a federal case waiting to land. The cabin air felt heavy, the way silence always does after violence. Ruth Daniels sat motionless, her trembling hand still on her cheek, a faint red mark blooming under soft brown skin. The flight attendant's chest rose and fell fast, panic hidden behind posture. She grabbed me, the woman repeated, voice brittle. I reacted. Leah stood, every motion deliberate. You reacted by striking a senior citizen. Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried. Even the hum of the engines seemed to pause to listen. Sit down, the attendant snapped, or I'll have security waiting when we land. Leah raised an eyebrow. Oh, you will, but you may want to look up 18 US Code Paragraph 113 first. It defines assault within special aircraft jurisdiction. That's 5 years minimum. The attendant's jaw tightened. I don't have to listen to... Yes, you do, Leah said, stepping into the aisle. And so does everyone else on this flight, because they just became witnesses. Around them, passengers fumbled for phones. Screens lit up, recording. The sound of camera shutters filled the cabin. Leah's voice remained calm. State your name, please. The attendant hesitated. Excuse me? Name, Leah repeated, tone flat, professional. For the record, Kelly Burns. Thank you, Ms. Burns. Leah turned slightly, addressing the cabin. Would someone confirm the time, please? A businessman in row 3 checked his watch. 2:47 p.m. Excellent. 2:47 p.m. Flight 282 from New York to Atlanta. Passenger Leah Daniels, documenting an incident involving assault on passenger Ruth Daniels by flight attendant Kelly Burns. Her phone camera stayed steady. Ruth tried to rise, but Leah placed a gentle hand on her arm. Stay seated, Nana. You don't have to prove you're dignified. You already are, the attendant's voice cracked. You can't talk to me like that. You think you know the law? Leah smiled faintly. I don't think. I study it. You struck a 75-year-old woman. Intentional contact. Witnessed. Recorded. You've just turned a customer complaint into a federal offense. A ripple of murmurs spread. Someone whispered. She's good. Kelly Burns took a step back, eyes darting toward the galley. Captain, we need assistance in first class, she called, her voice shaking now. The intercom crackled. Cabin secure. What's the emergency? Passenger disturbance, she said quickly. Leah turned toward the speaker. Correction. Crew-initiated assault. Passenger calm, cooperative, and bleeding. Please log that. Gasps spread through the cabin. The captain didn't respond. Leah met Kelly's eyes again. You might want to save the story for your supervisor. You're twisting everything, Kelly snapped. She grabbed my sleeve. Leah held up her phone. Play it back, she asked the nearest passenger. The man nodded, thumb tapping the screen. The replayed clip showed Ruth reaching for her dropped napkin, and the flash of Kelly's hands striking before words. The proof burned brighter than anger ever could. Kelly's face drained of color. That's out of context. Leah's tone was measured, precise. Context is exactly what law provides. She reached for her grandmother's fallen glasses, folding them gently and placing them on the tray. You don't get to erase this one, Ms. Burns. Not with apology, not with authority. You can sit in that galley and think about how the world looks when someone finally holds a mirror to it. Ruth touched her granddaughter's wrist. Leah, baby, don't ruin your trip for me. Leah knelt beside her, eyes softening. You raised me on right and wrong, Nana. This is just the grown-up version of that. When she stood again, her phone was still recording, but her hands no longer trembled. The power had already shifted, quietly, irreversibly. And 30,000 feet above the ground, the sky had just become a courtroom. For 10 long minutes, the cabin remained tense, half outrage, half disbelief. The hum of the engines was the only sound that felt normal. Kelly Burns disappeared behind the curtain to the galley, whispering furiously into the interphone. Every few seconds, she peeked out towards seat 2B, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. Leah kept the camera angled discreetly toward her lap. Everything after an assault is procedure, she murmured to herself, recalling her professor's words. Procedure wins cases. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman leaned over. Sweetheart, she really hit your grandma. Yes, ma'am, Leah said quietly. And she's about to lie about it to the captain. The woman pursed her lips. Not if half this cabin's filming? Leah smiled faintly. That's the beauty of witnesses. The law loves company. From the galley came raised voices. The captain's, clipped and impatient, and Kelly's, high-pitched, defensive. She threatened me, Kelly said. Her granddaughter's causing a disturbance. The curtains swished open. A tall man in a pilot's uniform approached, flanked by another attendant. Ma'am, he said evenly to Leah, we've had a report of aggressive behavior. Leah stood slowly, keeping her phone visible. Aggressive? Define that for me, Captain. Recording crew without consent, intimidating staff. Federal aviation regulations allow documentation during disputes involving potential assault. Leah interrupted. I'm protecting evidence, and before you ask, yes, I know my rights under the FAA's passenger bill. He blinked. Are you a lawyer? Almost, she said. Second year. Civil litigation focus. The captain's composure faltered. Please, let's keep everyone calm until we land. Agreed, Leah said. That starts with acknowledging who was hit. He hesitated, glancing at Ruth's cheek. The redness was unmistakable. The older woman met his eyes, silent but steady. Kelly burst in behind him. She grabbed my arm. I reacted. Leah turned to her phone again. For the record, the accused is changing her story for the third time. Kelly's voice cracked. Turn that thing off! Leah's voice remained soft. You already hit the record button, Ms. Burns. I just made it visible. A wave of quiet laughter rippled from the back rows. The pilot's jaw tightened. Enough, he said. We'll let ground security handle this. Leah nodded. That's all I'm asking. He turned to leave, but Kelly wasn't finished. I'll have her blacklisted. I know people at headquarters. Good, Leah said. They'll need to read my statement anyway. Kelly froze, confusion flickering behind anger. Leah tilted her head. You don't remember my last name, do you? Daniels. My grandfather was Justice Raymond Daniels, 11th Circuit Court. He wrote the ruling on Harper versus United Airways. You can Google it after you're suspended. The color drained from Kelly's face. You're bluffing, Leah smiled faintly. That's not my style. The captain cleared his throat. Let's all take our seats. Leah obeyed, slipping an arm around her grandmother. You doing okay, Nana? Ruth nodded slowly. You're scaring her, baby. Good, Leah said gently. Maybe she'll think before she hits someone again. As the plane began its descent, Kelly sat in the jump seat near the door, staring straight ahead, jaw tight. Leah could see her reflection in the metal panel. Wide eyes, shallow breaths, guilt bleeding through the uniform. When the landing gear lowered, Ruth whispered, Leah, promise me you won't let this ruin you. Leah squeezed her hand. It won't ruin me. It'll define her. The wheels touched down hard. Gasps filled the cabin as the brakes screamed. Outside the windows, flashing blue lights waited on the tarmac. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but strained. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Law enforcement will be boarding shortly. Leah looked at her grandmother, then at the curtains separating them from the door. Showtime, she murmured. And when the plane finally stopped, she was already standing, calm, ready, and holding the truth in her hand. The doors hissed open to a blast of humid air and flashing blue lights. 2 airport security officers stepped aboard, followed by a woman in a navy suit with a badge clipped to her belt. Federal Air Marshal Division. The captain greeted her quietly, but everyone heard. Assault report in first class. Phones rose like a forest of small eyes. The marshal's tone was professional, unhurried. I'm Agent Torres. Who's the complainant? Leah stood before anyone could speak. That would be us, she said, motioning to her grandmother. Torres approached, her expression neutral but curious. Tell me what happened, ma'am. Ruth hesitated. She hit me. I don't know why. I just asked for water. Torres nodded, scribbling notes. Did you strike back? No, ma'am. I was raised better than that. Kelly Burns stepped forward quickly. That's not true! She startled me. I acted in reflex. She grabbed my arm. Leah raised her phone. Agent Torres, may I play the recording? Torres gestured. Go ahead. The cabin grew silent as the video played. Ruth bending down to retrieve a napkin. Kelly's sudden slap. Ruth's stunned gasp. The sound was unmistakable. When it ended, Torres looked up slowly. That's pretty clear. Kelly's composure cracked. She dropped something. Leah's voice was even. Intent doesn't vanish when fear is fabricated. Torres fixed Kelly with a measured stare. You're aware this qualifies as assault under federal jurisdiction. Kelly swallowed hard. I didn't mean intent isn't required, Leah said softly, quoting statute like a lullaby. Just contact and harm, the passengers murmured in agreement. Someone in the back muttered. Finally, someone said it. Torres signaled the officers. Ms. Burns, please step off the aircraft. We'll take your statement separately. Kelly stiffened. I work for this airline. You can't. I can, Torres replied. And you're grounded until further notice. The officers guided Kelly down the aisle. She avoided Leah's eyes, but her face was pale with realization. The uniform that once gave her power now looked like a costume stripped of meaning. When the doors closed behind her, the cabin exhaled collectively. Some passengers applauded quietly. Others simply looked relieved. Torres turned back to Ruth and Leah. You'll both need to give official statements once we disembark. Miss Daniels, may I ask how you knew the statute? Leah smiled faintly. Law school. Second year. Torres raised an eyebrow. Remind me never to underestimate a student. The captain approached, clearly shaken. Miss Daniels, on behalf of the airline, I'm deeply sorry. I had no idea. Leah interrupted politely. With respect, Captain, it's your job to know. When bias flies first class, it's everyone's turbulence. He nodded, chastened. Understood. As the passengers filed out, several stopped to thank her. One woman whispered, My mom went through something like that. Thank you for standing up. Leah smiled, though her stomach still knotted. Standing's easier when you've got proof. When they finally stepped onto the jet bridge, a cluster of reporters was already waiting, alerted by passengers who'd streamed the incident live. Microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. Ruth flinched at the noise, but Leah guided her gently through. Ms. Daniels, is it true your grandmother was assaulted by crew? Yes, Leah said calmly, and the evidence is secure. What happens next? Leah stopped, looked straight into one lens, and spoke clearly. What happens next is accountability. The courtroom may be on the ground, but justice starts wherever a person refuses to stay silent. The clip would air worldwide within hours. In the footage, Leah's tone was composed, her grandmother dignified, her words echoing louder than any outrage. As they exited into the terminal, Ruth squeezed her granddaughter's hand. You didn't raise your voice once, she said softly. Leah smiled. Law doesn't shout, Nana. It proves. And as they walked toward the waiting officers, the sound of their footsteps was the only verdict the sky needed. By sunrise, the footage had gone viral. Every major network replayed the moment frame by frame. The slap, the silence, and Leah's calm declaration of law. Headlines screamed across screens. In-flight justice. Law student exposes attendant's assault on grandmother. Commentators debated everything from racial bias to airline ethics. Hashtags trended. Justice at 3,000 feet. And on Flyfair. Ruth and Leah. In her apartment, Leah sat cross-legged on the couch, phone buzzing non-stop. Classmates, professors, strangers, all offering support or outrage. She ignored most of it, scrolling until she found the one message that mattered. An email from a civil rights attorney she admired. Angela Shaw. You handled that better than half the attorneys I know. When you're ready, let's talk representation. This case is bigger than one slap. Her grandmother shuffled in wearing a robe, looking both proud and uneasy. Baby, they've got our faces on every channel. I don't like that kind of attention. Leah closed her laptop. I don't either, Nana. But maybe we can make it count. Across the city, in the gleaming offices of AeroWorld Airlines, panic brewed. The CEO, Richard Palmer, slammed his hand on the conference table. Who authorized that crew member to speak? We look like monsters. The head of PR adjusted her glasses. She gave an off-the-record statement before being suspended. Said she feared for her safety. Palmer snorted. Good luck selling that against the video. Another executive spoke up carefully. Sir, legal suggests settling before it hits federal court. Not yet, Palmer snapped. We'll issue a statement of concern, launch an internal review, and hope public memory is short. But public memory was not short, not when millions had seen the slap. Within hours, passengers posted their own testimonies about rude staff, discriminatory treatment, ignored complaints. What had started as one incident became an avalanche. That afternoon, Leah met with attorney Angela Shaw in a small cafe downtown. Angela was older, elegant, her voice low but decisive. What you did on that plane, that composure, was powerful, she said. But composure alone doesn't change policy. Lawsuits do, Leah nodded. I don't want money. I want reform, Angela smiled. Good, because we're going after more than damages. We'll demand mandatory bias training, transparent disciplinary reviews, and passenger protection clauses in staff contracts. Ruth looked uncertain. You sure we can win against an airline that big? Leah reached for her grandmother's hand. They fly at altitude, Nana. So do we. Angela pulled a folder from her briefcase. They'll try to spin it. Expect surveillance leaks, background checks, anything to make you the problem. Leah's eyes hardened. Let them. Truth doesn't need perfect people. Just honest ones. By evening, the airline released its statement. Aeroworld deeply regrets the incident involving Flight 282. We have suspended the employee pending investigation and reaffirm our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the comment sections beneath the post were merciless. Commitment? Only after getting caught. She quoted the law mid-air. Give her the job. Leah tried not to read them, but one message made her pause. It came from a retired judge, her grandfather's old colleague. Your grandfather would have been proud. He once told me, the law isn't a weapon, it's a mirror. You held it steady. Tears pricked her eyes for the first time since the flight. 2 days later, a subpoena arrived at Aeroworld's headquarters. Daniels v. Aeroworld Airlines, civil suit alleging assault, negligence, and systemic discrimination. Palmer cursed aloud. Who the hell is representing them? Angela Shaw's name gleamed on the paperwork, and beneath it, in smaller print, Student Co-Counsel, Leah M. Daniels. Palmer's jaw tightened. So the girl's not done. He turned toward his legal team. Fine. If she wants a fight, we'll bury her in paperwork. But far from the boardroom, Leah was already reading every statute, every precedent, her notes neat and color-coded. She wasn't planning to fight loud. She was planning to fight right. Because at 30,000 feet, arrogance had started it. On the ground, law would finish it. The storm truly began the next morning. Leah woke to a wall of notifications. Hundreds of news alerts, thousands of comments, and 3 missed calls from her university dean. The story had leapt from social media to national news. Major anchors were calling it a defining civil rights case for modern air travel. The network logos spun on her TV screen, the headlines relentless. Aeroworld hires top defense firm to fight Daniel's case, law student faces giants. Can she win? Her grandmother switched off the television. They're turning it into a circus, Ruth sighed. I don't want you swallowed up in it. Leah smiled faintly. Nana, the circus was already here. I'm just refusing to be the clown. At Aeroworld's headquarters, the defense firm Wilkins & Hartley LLP arrived in force. Suits, tablets, practiced smiles. Their lead attorney, Mark Wilkins, was infamous for destroying witnesses on cross-examination. We'll go after credibility, he said to Palmer. Paint the granddaughter as impulsive, social media-driven. Say she escalated a misunderstanding. Palmer nodded. Make the public forget the slap. Meanwhile, Leah and Angela Shaw set up camp in Angela's downtown office, a converted library lined with case files and history. On one wall hung a quote in brass letters. Justice is deliberate, not decorative. Angela spread documents across the table. They'll come for your character, she warned. Dig up anything. Grades, social posts, maybe that protest you joined freshman year. Leah's jaw tightened. Then they'll learn what due diligence feels like. I've already archived every flight complaint in the past 5 years. 42 passengers filed racial or age-related bias reports. None were resolved. Angela stared at her, impressed. You've done your homework. I'm my grandfather's granddaughter, Leah said simply. 3 weeks later, the pre-trial hearing opened in a packed Atlanta courtroom. Cameras were banned, but reporters filled the halls. Wilkins began with charm. Your Honor, this was an unfortunate misunderstanding. My client reacted instinctively. No malice, no pattern. Angela rose. Your Honor, pattern is exactly what we'll prove. She gestured to Leah, who wheeled forward a cart stacked with files. Exhibits A through J, verified complaints from minority passengers citing discriminatory conduct by Aeroworld staff. Each dismissed, each ignored, the courtroom murmured. Wilkins tried to interrupt. Objection. Irrelevant to this individual incident. Leah spoke for the first time, voice calm and clear. Pattern establishes foreseeability, counsel. You can't claim surprise when you built the conditions for it. Judge Morales glanced over his glasses, a hint of respect flickering. Objection overruled. Proceed. Wilkins' jaw clenched. He turned toward Leah, a predator recalculating. Ms. Daniels, you're still a student, correct? No bar license? Yes, but I study under Rule 9, authorized supervised practice. So, no real experience? She smiled. Just lived experience, which counts for more in this case. A quiet ripple of laughter moved through the spectators. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Ms. Daniels, do you think you're in over your head? Leah paused on the steps, sunlight glinting off her briefcase. Not at all, she said. The law doesn't care about size. It cares about evidence. And we have plenty, Angela leaned in as they descended. You know he's going to come at you harder now. Good, Leah said. Let him swing. The harder he hits, the clearer the recording looks. By evening, hashtags multiplied again. Leah vs Goliath, law student for justice, fly human. TV hosts dissected her composure, her calm intelligence. Public opinion tilted fast. Aeroworld stock dipped 5% overnight. In the boardroom, Palmer stared at the numbers. She's winning hearts, not just the case. Wilkins smirked thinly. Then we'll change the battlefield. He slid a file across the table labeled Leah Daniels Background. Inside were photos from her old campus protests, screenshots of outspoken posts on police reform. Next hearing, he said, we make her the radical, undermine her credibility before the verdict can crown her hero. But what Wilkins didn't know, what no one yet realized, was that Leah had already predicted the move, and she had evidence waiting that would turn their smear campaign into their self-incrimination. Because she didn't just know the law, she knew strategy, and the storm she'd survived at 30,000 feet was nothing compared to the one she was about to unleash on the ground. The day of the second hearing dawned grey and heavy with rain. Crowds filled the courthouse steps despite the weather, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Inside, the tension had its own humidity, charged, expectant. Reporters whispered predictions. Law students from nearby universities packed the gallery, notebooks ready. At the defense table, Mark Wilkins shuffled papers like weapons. Leah could almost hear the smug rhythm of his thoughts. She sat beside Angela, calm, her grandmother behind them holding a worn leather Bible. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise." Judge Morales entered, expression unreadable. "We'll resume Daniels vs. Aeroworld Airlines. Counsel, proceed." Wilkins rose, his tone syrup smooth. "Your Honor, before cross-examination continues, the defense submits new evidence relevant to the plaintiff's credibility." Angela tensed. "Here it comes," she murmured. Wilkins projected a slide onto the courtroom screen. Images of Leah at a student protest, fist raised, headlines from old campus articles. "Ms. Daniels," he said, turning toward her, "you've been a vocal activist, correct? Attending demonstrations, speaking publicly against law enforcement." Leah didn't blink. "Yes. So you admit bias against authority figures?" "No," she said softly. "I admit awareness of injustice." "There's a difference." Murmurs rippled through the room. Wilkins pressed on, feigning innocence. "And would you say this activism influences your interpretation of events?" Leah smiled faintly. "Only in that, I've learned how powerful people behave when they think no one's recording." Angela caught the flicker in her eye. Leah had a plan. "Your Honor," Leah said, standing, with the court's permission, "I'd like to respond to this exhibit by presenting one of my own." Wilkins smirked. "We're not in the show-and-tell business, Ms. Daniels." Judge Morales waved a hand. "Let's hear her out." Leah walked to the projector and connected her tablet. "Mr. Wilkins suggested I'm biased, but bias is about motive, so let's examine his." The screen changed to an audio waveform. Then voices crackled to life. The sound of a conference call, grainy but unmistakable. "Wilkins, we'll leak her protest photos, paint her emotional, unstable. Public will eat it up." "Palmer, whatever it takes to shut her down." Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Angela's pen froze midair. Wilkins' face went white. Judge Morales slammed his gavel. "Where did you get that recording?" Leah answered evenly. "From a whistleblower at Aeroworld. It's authentic, verified by metadata." "Your Honor, this demonstrates deliberate character defamation and corporate manipulation of public perception." Wilkins sputtered. "Objection. Illegally obtained." Angela rose. "Not if the source was internal and voluntary." Federal precedent U.S. vs. Caceres, 440 U. S. 741. Recorded without coercion. Admissible. The judge considered, then nodded. "Objection overruled. Continue." Leah faced Wilkins, her voice calm as law school recitation. "You accuse me of bias, yet your own conversation shows intent to distort truth. The difference between me and you, counselor, is that I fight my cases in daylight." The gallery broke into quiet applause before the gavel silenced them. Judge Morales turned to Wilkins. "Mr. Wilkins, this borders on obstruction. I suggest you sit down." He did, shoulders caving. Across the aisle, the airline's CEO looked like a man watching his empire crumble one bite at a time. Leah returned to her seat beside Angela. Her grandmother's hand found hers, warm and steady. "You didn't just win, baby," Ruth whispered. "You taught," Leah squeezed back gently. "That's what law should do." The judge cleared his throat. "We'll recess until tomorrow. At that time, I expect settlement discussions to be very short." As the courtroom emptied, reporters surged forward. Angela whispered, "You just changed the case, and maybe the profession." Leah smiled, exhaustion giving way to quiet triumph. "Truth doesn't need a megaphone," she said. "Just a clear recording. Outside, the rain had stopped. The crowd cheered as she stepped into the open air, cameras flashing like distant lightning. Somewhere above, a plane cut through thinning clouds, its wings gleaming in sunlight breaking through, a reminder that even storms have ceilings. Leah looked up and whispered, "Your move, Justice," and the sky, impossibly wide, seemed to nod back. By the next morning, every news channel on the continent carried the same lead. Student lawyer outsmarts corporate giants. Aero World caught plotting smear campaign. Clips of Leah in court, poised, articulate, her tone quiet but surgical, looped endlessly. Legal analysts called it a masterclass in precision advocacy. At Aero World headquarters, chaos reigned. Executives resigned in clusters. Investors demanded emergency sessions. The board voted unanimously to remove CEO Richard Palmer by noon. For the first time, the company issued a genuine statement instead of a press-crafted apology. "We acknowledge a failure in leadership and ethics." Effective immediately, Aero World accepts full responsibility for the assault aboard Flight 282 and the subsequent attempts to discredit the victims. "We will cooperate with federal authorities and implement independent oversight." When Leah read the release aloud, her grandmother set down her tea, eyes misting. "They finally said sorry," Ruth whispered. Leah nodded slowly. "Words are good. Consequences are better." Angela smiled across the table. "You're about to get both." 2 weeks later, settlement negotiations unfolded in the same courtroom that had hosted the drama. The mood was solemn, the stakes colossal. Wilkins had withdrawn from the case, replaced by a visibly nervous junior partner. Opposite him, Leah and Angela represented not anger, but gravity. The judge reviewed the paperwork. "Terms of resolution?" Angela stood. "Aeroworld will issue a formal apology to Ms. Ruth Daniels, publicly acknowledge misconduct, and pay damages totaling $5 million. More importantly, they will establish the Daniels policy, mandatory empathy, discrimination, and crisis response training for all crew and executives. Non-compliance triggers suspension of license renewals." A collective murmur filled the gallery. This wasn't a payout, it was precedent. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Defense?" The young attorney's voice wavered. "We accept the terms, Your Honor." The gavel fell once, sharp and final. "Then it's done." Ruth squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "You did it, baby," Leah exhaled softly. "We did it, Nana. You and me." Reporters rushed toward the steps as they exited. Cameras flashed. "Ms. Daniels, what's next for you?" Leah paused, smile calm but unshakable. "The Daniels policy isn't the end, it's the beginning. The goal isn't punishment, it's progress, and progress needs maintenance." Her words replayed across networks that night, quoted by journalists, students, and politicians alike. Weeks turned to months. Aero World's new leadership reached out to Leah and Angela to consult on their internal reforms. Leah declined payment. "Justice isn't a service you invoice," she said. At Columbia, she returned to classes quietly. Professors applauded when she entered. Classmates whispered with awe. She handled it all with grace. "I'm still a student," she'd tell them, "just with an unusual final project." Her grandmother's life changed too. Invitations poured in from community groups, churches, and universities. Ruth spoke softly at each event, never dramatizing the slap, only emphasizing the aftermath. "My granddaughter taught me something," she'd say. "You don't fight hate by matching its tone. You fight it by raising the standard." One evening, after yet another interview request, Leah sat on her apartment balcony overlooking the city lights. The hum of distant planes drifted through the air. For the first time since that flight, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. Ruth called from inside. "You all right, baby?" Leah smiled. "Better than all right." She looked up at a passing jet, its lights slicing across the night. "For years, those skies belonged to fear," she whispered. "Now, maybe, they belong to fairness." And as the plane disappeared into the clouds, the world she'd helped reshape continued moving forward. Slow, imperfect, but at last in the right direction. Within months, the Daniels policy spread beyond one company. The FAA adopted it as a model program, and international regulators began drafting similar frameworks. Airlines that once called the case isolated now raced to comply. Airports installed empathy training centers. Flight simulators included lessons on bias and de-escalation. Reporters called it the Skies Civil Rights Act. Leah split her time between classes and helping craft the legal text. Every clause mattered. Definitions of harassment, escalation protocols, passenger protection. Late nights found her and Angela bent over laptops, arguing commas and case law. "Precision is mercy," Angela would say. "It stops loopholes before they're born." Ruth watched proudly from home, surrounded by newspaper clippings. When her church friends visited, she'd smile shyly and say, "My granddaughter turned turbulence into testimony." One morning, Leah woke to an email from the Secretary of Transportation inviting her to Washington. "We'd like you to witness the signing of the Daniels Reform Act," it read. She printed it out and stuck it on her fridge. The signing took place in a marble hall flooded with cameras. Government officials, airline executives, union reps, they all stood as Leah and Ruth entered. A senator whispered, "That's her," as if history had just walked in. The secretary spoke first. "Because of these women, safety in the skies now means dignity in the skies." Applause followed. When Leah's turn came, she kept her remarks brief. "Justice isn't altitude," she said. "It's equilibrium. We're just making sure the plane's finally level." Ruth's hand found hers as flashbulbs popped. "You did good, baby." "No," Leah whispered back. "We did right." After the ceremony, journalists crowded them. "What's next, Ms. Daniels?" one asked. Leah smiled. "I graduate." Back at Columbia, she gave a guest lecture on ethics in litigation. The auditorium overflowed. Students leaned forward as she described her courtroom tactics, her calm voice firm. "The goal isn't to win loudly," she told them. "It's to prove so clearly that noise becomes unnecessary." A student asked, "How did it feel standing up there against all those lawyers?" Leah thought for a moment. "Like flying through turbulence, you don't fight the air, you navigate it." Her classmates applauded. Her professor beamed. "You've redefined professional conduct," he said afterward, "and you haven't even taken the bar." "I'm practicing for the right reasons first," Leah replied. Months later, she received a letter from the airline's new CEO. "Thank you for forcing us to evolve. We now train crews using your courtroom testimony. It's required viewing." Ruth framed the letter, hanging it next to the photo of their first flight together. "See?" she said, tapping the glass. "Even storms say thank you if you outlast them." Leah laughed softly. "Maybe next time we just buy train tickets." Her grandmother chuckled. "Where's the lesson in that?" As evening fell, they sat on the porch watching contrails dissolve into the sunset. The sky, once a symbol of trauma, had become a monument to change. Every jet that passed overhead carried a piece of their story in its policies, its training, its conscience. Ruth rested her head on her granddaughter's shoulder. "You think people remember us?" Leah smiled. "They don't have to. The system will." The sound of a distant plane rolled over them, steady even, almost peaceful. For the first time in years, Leah didn't flinch when she heard it. She just listened, hearing not engines but evolution. Justice had found altitude, and it was cruising steady. 5 years passed before Leah really noticed that the world had changed. She was no longer the student on a mission, but attorney Leah Daniels, founder of the non-profit Equal Altitude Initiative. Its logo, a wing balanced on a scale, appeared on posters in airports from Chicago to Seoul. Her grandmother's name, Ruth, was engraved on every scholarship the group funded. From her new office overlooking the Potomac, Leah watched aircraft lift into the morning haze. Each takeoff sounded less like metal and more like promise. On her desk lay a framed photo of that day in court, and a smaller one of Ruth, smiling in her church hat. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A young intern stepped in, holding a stack of files. "We've finalized the training agreements for South African Airways," she said. "They want you to open their conference next month." Leah nodded. "Book it and make sure our local council gets the credit. No one changes the world alone." When the intern left, Leah opened a handwritten letter that had arrived without return address. "Dear Ms. Daniels, I was on that flight. I never spoke up because I froze. I've carried guilt ever since, but I'm a flight attendant now, and every day I remember what you said. That silence can be a verdict. I promise you, not on my watch." She folded the letter carefully and placed it beside her grandmother's photo. "You're still teaching, Nana," she whispered. That evening, she walked along the National Mall, the air crisp, the sky a bruised violet. A memorial ceremony was underway at the new Justice Through Air exhibit, a timeline carved in steel showing how aviation reform became a global movement. Near the entrance, a bronze plaque read, "Dedicated to Ruth and Leah Daniels, who proved that altitude has no hierarchy." Reporters recognized her, but didn't crowd. Reverence had replaced curiosity. A girl, maybe 12, approached timidly. "Are you really the lawyer from the video?" Leah smiled. "Just someone who didn't turn her camera off." The girl held out a notebook. "I want to be a lawyer too." "Then promise me one thing," Leah said, signing her name across the first page. "When the world goes quiet, you make it listen." The girl nodded solemnly and ran back to her parents. Leah watched her disappear into the crowd, thinking how every victory should make itself unnecessary someday. Later that night, at home, she poured tea and opened her journal, the same one she'd used during law school. On a fresh page she wrote, "Justice doesn't retire. It changes jobs. Today it works as policy, tomorrow as kindness." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, followed by the soft hum of a plane descending toward Reagan Airport. She stepped onto her balcony, the city glowing below. In that hum she heard not memory but continuity, a rhythm of lives still boarding, still landing, still treated as equals. Her phone buzzed with a video call. The Equal Altitude interns celebrating their latest training milestone. She smiled at their faces, young, diverse, bright with belief. Remember, she told them, the goal isn't perfection. It's persistence. After the call, she lingered on the balcony until the rain began. Drops tapped the railing like applause from somewhere unseen. She tilted her face upward, eyes closed. We did it, Nana, she whispered. We finally made the sky fair. Somewhere above the clouds, a jet's lights blinked once, then twice, as if agreeing. Leah laughed quietly and went inside, leaving the window open so the sound could stay, a living echo of everything she and her grandmother had built. The engines faded, the rain softened, and the world settled into its new normal, balanced, breathing, beautifully just, and high above, justice kept flying steady. The morning sun spilled through soft curtains, warm and forgiving. Leah woke before her alarm, the quiet hum of the city rising like a heartbeat outside her apartment window. For the first time in years, she didn't feel compelled to check her phone or open case files. The world was running on laws she'd helped write, steady, predictable, finally fair. She walked into the kitchen, where the smell of fresh coffee lingered beside a framed photo of Ruth, smiling, vibrant, eternal. Every morning, Leah spoke to it softly. Morning, Nana. No hearings today. Just peace. She made 2 cups out of habit, setting one by the photo before taking hers to the balcony. The sky stretched wide and open above the city, streaked with early contrails glowing gold in the light. She watched a plane ascend, its engines soft against the dawn. Once that sound had carried trauma. Now it carried gratitude. She thought about how many flights were safer now, not because turbulence had disappeared, but because compassion had finally been built into policy. She imagined the crews who learned empathy not as a script, but as reflex. Passengers who boarded without bracing for bias. Families who could just fly. Her phone buzzed with a message from Angela. Miss you in the trenches, counselor. The next generation's ready. We trained them on your deposition videos today. Leah smiled. The next generation. That was the real verdict. Students who didn't need anger to pursue justice, only clarity. A knock came at her door. When she opened it, a delivery man stood there with a small bouquet of lilies and a card. Ms. Daniels, this was sent from the Aero World Ethics Office. She blinked, surprised. The card inside read, for Ms. Ruth and Ms. Leah Daniels. Because courage can be contagious. Her eyes softened. She placed the lilies in a vase beside Ruth's photo, their white petals luminous in the sunlight. See, Nana, she whispered. Even the sky remembers your name. That afternoon, she walked through the city park, where she and Ruth had often sat during law school breaks. Children played on swings, their laughter crisp against the wind. Leah sat on their old bench, running her hand over the carved initials she and her grandmother had scratched there years ago. R+. L. Strength. She closed her eyes, hearing Ruth's voice like it was yesterday, gentle but firm. You can win a case, baby, but the real victory is when the world starts acting right without needing a judge. Tears gathered, but didn't fall. Instead, she breathed in the sound of life moving on, people talking, birds calling, wind whispering through trees, and knew Ruth had been right. The world was still imperfect, but it was learning. A little girl passed by holding her mother's hand, pointing to Leah. Mommy, that's the lady from the airport story. Leah laughed softly. Hi there. Did you really save your grandma? She saved me first, Leah said with a smile. The girl nodded thoughtfully, as if she understood something bigger than words. My mum says you made flying nicer. Leah's throat tightened. I hope I made it kinder. They waved goodbye, and as the pair walked away, Leah leaned back, letting the sunlight warm her face. She felt the same peace Ruth used to radiate, the quiet confidence of someone who had already fought their hardest battle and won not through rage, but through grace. The world no longer called her victim or hero. It called her precedent, and as another jet whispered across the blue above, Leah whispered back, keep flying steady. The sky, vast and endless, seemed to listen. The small brick church in Savannah still smelled of cedar and old hymns. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting soft blues and ambers across the pews. Leah stood in the entryway, clutching a bouquet of lilies, the same kind she used to leave by her grandmother's photo every morning. Today was the first Ruth Daniels Memorial Service for Justice, hosted by the community that had raised Ruth and quietly cheered Leah from afar. Inside, the congregation buzzed with reverent warmth. Elderly women in wide hats greeted her like family. That's Ruth's baby, one whispered proudly. The one who took the sky to court. Leah smiled humbly, shaking hands, embracing strangers who somehow knew her whole story. Each person had a version of Ruth to share. A teacher, a neighbor, a mother figure. Each memory felt like a verse in a song Leah already knew by heart. The The choir began softly, singing "His Eye is on the Sparrow." Leah sat in the front pew, head bowed. She could almost hear Ruth's alto humming along. When the pastor spoke, his voice carried the calm of faith that had anchored Ruth through every injustice life threw her way. "We gather today not to mourn," he said, "but to celebrate a woman who believed kindness could be law, and who passed that faith to her granddaughter, so the world would have one more fighter who leads with peace." Leah felt her throat tighten. She had faced senators, CEOs, and courtrooms without trembling, but here, in the presence of her grandmother's legacy, her composure finally cracked. Tears rolled freely. After the service, she stepped outside to the courtyard, where a small stone bench stood beneath a magnolia tree. Carved into it were Ruth's favourite words: "Grace under pressure." A familiar voice behind her said, "She'd be proud, you know." Leah turned. It was Angela Shaw, her mentor and partner, holding 2 cups of sweet tea. "I couldn't miss this," Angela said, handing her one. "You changed the air we breathe, Leah! Literally!" Leah laughed softly. "Feels strange, doesn't it? The world's still messy, but quieter somehow." Angela nodded. "Justice doesn't erase chaos. It teaches it manners." They sat together in silence, listening to the magnolia leaves rustle. Children played tag near the church steps, their laughter blending with the hum of cicadas. Leah watched them and smiled. "Nana used to say peace was just fairness practiced daily," she murmured. "Maybe that's what we're doing. Daily practice." Angela turned to her. "So what's next for you, counselor?" Leah looked up at the sky, where a single plane drifted lazily toward the horizon. "Teaching, maybe. I want to build something that outlives outrage. A school, a fellowship, something that teaches young advocates how to stay calm in chaos." Angela grinned. "Call it the Ruth Daniels Institute and I'll fund it myself." Leah smiled through her tears. "Deal." That evening, back in her hotel room, Leah unpacked her grandmother's old Bible, the one Ruth had always kept tucked into her purse. A folded scrap of paper slipped out. On it, in Ruth's tidy handwriting, were the words, "If you ever doubt yourself, remember that courage doesn't shout. It whispers, 'Keep going.'" Leah pressed the paper to her chest. "I hear you, Nana," she whispered. She placed the Bible on the nightstand beside her phone, where new messages kept lighting up. Young law students, civil rights groups, flight crews thanking her for the world she'd helped fix. Scrolling through them, she realized the story wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever chosen dignity over rage, proof over shouting, truth over power. The world had changed, not all at once, but enough. Leah drew the curtains open and looked out at the moonlit sky. Another plane passed overhead, its lights steady and sure. "Fly gentle," she said softly. "Fly right," and the hum faded into the night. Part lullaby, part legacy. 10 years later, the Ruth Daniels Institute stood at the edge of the Columbia campus, its glass facade reflecting both sky and memory. The sign at the entrance read, "Training Advocates for a Fairer Tomorrow." Inside, students filled classrooms that buzzed with debate, not about winning, but about listening, reasoning, restoring. Professor Leah Daniels walked the corridors quietly, coffee in one hand, lesson plans in the other. Her hair had a few silver strands now, her voice the same calm certainty that once disarmed a courtroom. On her office wall hung a photograph of Ruth under a magnolia tree. Her smile caught mid-laugh. Every semester, Leah began her first lecture the same way. Law isn't thunder, it's gravity. It keeps the world from floating off its promises. Her students always fell silent then, some inspired, some curious, some tearful. They didn't know every detail of her story, only that she'd once turned an injustice into a movement, and that was enough. After class, she walked across the courtyard, where magnolias bloomed in spring air. A maintenance worker nodded politely. "Morning, Professor Daniels. The plaque's polished if you want to see it." She smiled. "Thank you." At the center of the garden stood a bronze sculpture. 2 figures holding hands beneath the shape of a plane's wing. The inscription read, "Dedicated to those who fight with composure." Beneath it, smaller text added, "In honor of Ruth Daniels, whose grace taught the law to breathe." Leah touched the metal lightly, her reflection shimmering across its surface. "Still teaching me, Nana," she whispered. A soft breeze rustled the magnolia leaves, carrying the faint scent of blossoms and jet fuel from the nearby city air. The sound reminded her of childhood summers in Savannah, church choirs, porch swings, laughter, and Ruth's voice reading scripture over the hum of cicadas. That evening, a former student visited her office, a young man in his 20s, nervous but determined. "Professor, I'm working on a case. Racial profiling at an airport checkpoint. I wanted your advice." Leah gestured for him to sit. "Tell me the facts first, feelings later," she said. echoing Ruth's wisdom. He outlined the case carefully, voice shaking at first, then steadier. When he finished, she smiled. You already know what to do. Just stay calm when they get loud. That's how truth hears itself. He grinned, relief spreading across his face. That's exactly what my mom said about you. Quiet power. After he left, Leah sat back, letting the silence settle. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the campus gold. She realized the world no longer needed her to shout or prove anything. Her voice had become part of the larger harmony, one where justice, once broken, now hummed in tune. Later, she walked home along the river. The city lights reflected on the water like scattered constellations. Above them, a plane crossed the twilight, its navigation lights blinking in rhythm with her heartbeat. She stopped, hand on the railing, eyes following its climb. Every flight is a reminder, she murmured. We rise together, or not at all. From her pocket, she pulled out the worn scrap of Ruth's handwriting. Courage whispers, keep going. She smiled softly and tucked it back against her heart. The night was calm, the kind of calm Ruth would have called earned. The air smelled of rain and magnolias. Somewhere far above, passengers slept, read, or prayed, unaware that the peace surrounding them had been bought by one woman's composure and another's courage. Leah turned for home, her steps unhurried, steady, certain. Behind her, the sky glowed faintly, as if the world itself remembered. And as another plane curved gracefully through the stars, she whispered her grandmother's final lesson. Fly right, fly kind. The engines faded into distance, leaving only the hush of wind and a peace that felt infinite. Justice had found its forever altitude,